What's going on, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. Today it is a sunny day, a wintry day, around 25 degrees out, and I'm going to show you how to manually orbit like a man with your Mini 2 or really any drone. So there's no real shortcut to it. Essentially, just like anything, practice, practice, and more practice. So if you're bored one day or you're just sitting around, go and find something safe. If you're starting out, find a water tower in an empty field or something and just try to manually orbit. But I'm going to show you and walk you through what you need to do in order to do that, because the quick shot modes honestly are pretty lame. It's kind of like being in an auto mode on your camera as opposed to being in manual mode. You want to be manually controlling your drone to get the best cinematic footage you can. So with that being said, drone is in my hand. I'm going to launch them and get this thing up in the air. Okay, so the focus is going to be on the sticks. We got our left stick, our right stick, and we're going to cruise over to the location. I'm going to make sure I'm at a high enough altitude. This is not necessarily what you'd want to practice on per se. Let me make sure there's no cars. I'm going to cross the street. But we have a beautiful sunny day finally. One of the first things you want to make sure is that you're clear of all objects. So right now I'm going to 147 feet, something that I know is higher than the tree. So if I'm going sideways, I'm not going to go ahead and clip anything. And if you see the sticks, I'm moving to the right now. So I'm pushing the right stick to the right. And the bottom line is you got to go in the opposite direction with the left stick in order to start that rotation. I'm not going to do this right now, but you can see now I'm starting that orbit motion. And it's essentially making sure the pressure on each stick aligns and is very much balanced and perfect. So that's going to get you the best orbit. And one of the key things that I really found helpful is enabling this grid. If you go to the top right corner where you have these three dots, you go into camera over here. So click the dots, go into camera, press that, and you enable basically all your grids. So keep all of these enabled, because if you don't, you really can't tell where this thing's centered. But if you enable them all, look what happens. Oop. Now I can put a pinpoint target essentially on that thing and line up and just start orbiting this thing and knowing where exactly I need to be. Like, see, if I was orbiting and I swerve off, I know it's not going to actually be good. So let's go ahead and get a little closer to this guy. I'm going to fly in a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is line up the crosshair to the middle of the object I want to orbit. And then I'm going to start, personally, I'm going to go to the right. Everyone, I think, will favor one side more. I favor going to the right. But what happens is I'm going to start recording. I'm going to push on the right stick. See the stick? I'm going to push slightly. Now, I have it in normal mode. To get a really smooth orbit, you can go into tripod mode and slow everything down. So that's going to be the best cinematic type option, is cinematic mode. But I'm going to go into normal mode, which is a little faster, just to kind of zap around to where I want to be. But if I slowly go on the right stick and then I balance it out by pushing this left stick, this guy, see that? Boop, 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 boop. So not over there, so I'm going to go over here. So essentially if I start going to the right and I start pushing on the left stick to the left in the opposite direction, you just want to keep that crosshair in the area where it needs to be. So as you see, I'm manually orbiting this thing, and if I feel I'm swerving a little bit, like if I'm going a little bit that direction, and push a little bit more pressure on the left stick to the left, to the opposite direction, until you kind of get back in that center zone. But it takes a little bit of practice like anything, and there's no real easy way around it other than just keep on practicing. But these grids will really help out. Slowing things down and putting it into cinematic mode will help out too, because it's obviously slower to control and a little bit more manageable. But Essentially, all you're doing is trying to find that little groove, and it takes some time. Sometimes it's harder than other times. It's kind of like anything. Some days you really click and nail it, and other times not so much. So I'm going to go ahead and start recording, and let's just kind of cruise. So I'm going more on the right stick, and I'm just looking at that crosshair, making sure it's like right over in the center, in that general area, and I'm pushing slightly on the left stick in the opposite direction. And there's some wind out today. Maybe I could raise the gimbal slightly, which takes more practice. But you could see, really, really nice and not hard to do once you find that little balance. And again, the crosshair to me, all those little grids on the Fly app, really, really work out. Maybe you can go and raise the gimbal right now, since we got the sun over there. And look how beautiful that is. Really nice. You got a few movements. We're going left, we're going right, whatever. I mean, we're going to the right, we're orbiting. We're raising the gimbal slightly. And voila, nice little shot. And I do have a Tiffin ND16 on here for this bright sunny day, so you guys are aware. And if you zoom in, it's going to be that much harder because everything's magnified. It's less forgiving to try to keep this thing centered. So like if I'm over here, and again, I'm got my crosshair right in the middle, let me click recording, and I'm going to start with this right stick and moving to the right a little bit, and we'll do an opposite direction orbit soon too. And look at that. You just kind of finesse it. This is a little bit more challenging because we're magnified. It's kind of like if the margin of error is greater because everything is intensified. It's kind of like moving a zoom lens. If you're zoomed in 500 millimeters, just a little blip will throw you off focus. But look at that. This is really, really a nice movement. We got it magnified. You got to always pay attention to what's around you. When you're zoomed in like this, it's going to be that much more challenging. So again, after you get familiar and more confident with an orbit in 1x zoom, maybe try 2x zoom, and let's go in the opposite direction. This is going to be really more challenging for me. So I'm going to start with the right stick again, and instead of going in the right direction, I'm going to go in the left direction. And then I'm going to counter and use my left stick and push it in the opposite direction towards the other stick, and then just try to find that balance. And again, this direction for me isn't as easy to nail. See how the drone's kind of drifting a little bit? I don't know why. I think it's the wind. If you kind of get off a little bit, just let off the one stick and kind of recenter. Like right now, if I'm over here, I'm going to let off the left stick a little bit to kind of get that guide right back in the middle, and then start trying to keep them both centered again at the same direction and the same intensity with your fingers. So I'm not pushing on these sticks with a lot of force. I'm really, really barely, you can see, I'm not like, it's just a little blip. Because you don't want big, fast movements. And again, this is so much nicer than the quick shot mode. The quick shot modes, honestly, are pretty lame in my opinion. They work, but look at that. I mean, that's so much prettier. And if you veer a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. Like I'm pushing now on my left stick a little bit more. There we go, centered, raised the gimbal a little bit, which is kind of like patting your belly and rubbing your head or whatever at the same time. It's not that easy to do. Pretty cool, right? Maybe do a reveal now of what's going on over here. And nice. Okay. What you're going to be conscious of is the stick direction. If I'm going and doing a right orbit, I'm going to be taking this right stick, going to the right, and however you want to grab it. Sometimes I rest my hand and just kind of pinch on the side and put my finger almost on this little ball part right here. So just kind of rest and get a little smooth movement and kind of put pressure against my movement. So it's like I'm pulling with my fingers, but at the same time, I'm kind of putting a little pressure with this bottom part of my finger on this little area of the stick. So I'm kind of doing almost like a little resistance with my own finger, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to go and do one more time, get some nice little lens flare, hit record. Got a rip in my finger. And now I'm going to start again. Pulling slightly on my right stick, slightly more on my left stick now to get that crosshair center. And now maybe raise the gimbal with my left finger. I got the gimbal really dialed down in the advanced gimbal settings. And that's not great. That one wasn't great. But again, if you don't get the shot the first time, do it again until you do nail it. That's the whole point. And practice. More practice is going to be better. But you see, pretty cool. That crosshair is still roughly in the middle of the windmill. I'm going to stop over here to not cross the street. And voila. So if we want to go ahead and do one more time, I'm going to go back a little further to get away from everyone. Maybe I can go ahead and magnify, and we'll try a left orbit one more time. Again, when we're doing a left orbit, we're going to go left on the right stick, and then right on the left stick. So I know that sounds kind of confusing, but you'll get the hang of it and you'll know. And again, when I start, essentially what I'm doing is pushing on the left stick first to start the movement, and then I'm keeping my eye on that crosshair and where it's at in center of the subject, and then I start pushing. Sometimes I just rest my finger like this and just kind of push in a little bit and just hold the resistance. So let me try that again. It's hard to actually explain and do it because you just do it essentially. It's second nature. And when you have to explain, sometimes it isn't as easy. So see that? I'm actually doing an orbit and I'm not even really on the stick. I'm just pushing the opposite direction on that little black part with my finger. And I find that works really well. Now I'll raise the gimbal. Oop, off a little bit. I'll let off a... Yeah, that... See, I messed up. So that sucked. Let's do a further one. I'm going to get away from everyone. This may be a little bit more challenging. I'm going to go in the right direction. First thing I'm going to do is line up the crosshair on the subject, go to the right, and as you see, I'm not even holding the stick, like pinching the stick. I'm just literally pushing my finger in the opposite direction. So I'm essentially holding the stick with the main one to control the left and right movement. And in order to kind of just counter it, I'm just pushing on the stick with my finger, with my thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and line up and start. Do a little faster. Whoop. Let off my left stick a little bit because I'm not centered. Recenter. There we go. We kind of lock in. Now I'm going kind of fast on this one. But you get the idea. If I really wanted to do a nicer orbit, what I would do, I'm going to stop and not cross the road, is throw it in the tripod mode or cine mode or cinematic mode, whatever you want to say. And I'm going to start going. I'm just doing it like I would without recording. I got to try to just make my hands function. I'm going to push left on the right stick and then opposite direction with the left stick, just watching that crosshair, making sure it stays center and adjusting accordingly, which is hard to explain. Again, it's just something that's going to come with practice. There we go. And when you kind of nail it, you just kind of nail it. And you just hold that position and just keep it going. And then you try to add another movement, like a gimbal movement into it. And that's how you improve. So like anything, just practice, because it's going to take time. You just can't get a drone and get in the air and be a good pilot or good cinematic type footage pilot. This is more for the tutorial to show you guys, not necessarily the best cinematic footage. I can try to get some better shots when I'm not recording. Okay, so as you can see, drone is physically back home. And the key thing that you're going to want to make sure you have when you're doing these orbit, let me put this drone down. So one of the key things, as I said, when you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure you have these grids enabled. I think that is key to nailing a manual orbit. If you don't have these crosshair grids enabled, it's going to be really, really challenging. And again, be aware and just start the movement with the one stick. Maybe start out in normal mode just to see how much a bad movement will affect something, and then of course go into tripod mode or cinematic mode to slow down your movements and just play. Basically, you got to practice and more practice. Find, as I said, a water tower, something really easy with not a lot of trees or just an open space so you don't have any issue, and start a right orbit by pushing on the right stick in the right direction, and then counter with the left stick in the left direction. And again, try however you want. If you're good with pinching the sticks or however you want to fly, go ahead and rock that. I find with the orbit, at least, just putting a little pressure with your thumb, going either a little to the left or a little to the right, and just kind of holding it there, really gives you a lot of fine tuning movement. So this, I think, is key too. So I think with any of this, practice again, and there's no real quick way to get good at it, but the quick shot mode's pretty lame. Get out of auto mode or quick shot mode and get into manual flying. It will definitely improve everything, and it will improve your movements. So I hope that helps, guys. Aloha, peace. Hit the thumbs up button, please. It really helps out. And subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want. I'll be in Hawaii sometime in February. Not a date set yet. I'm going to try to make the ticket today or tomorrow. But again, thanks. Aloha and practice. Happy flying.